something you can do with texture paint is actually make landscapes. This is a 5000. I'm going to show Godot. I'm also going to show how to do it. It's not actually that hard. It's just a little tedious. And it's something you would want to do if you were using an engine that didn't have a landscape maker, or you didn't want to use a landscape maker. But also, there are benefits to using this method, and I'll get into that as well. So, which one was it? First game. So I ported this over to the engine. Just open these and switch to 2D. I ported this over to the engine. So the way I would do it is I click Open Scene New. This is a different one. This is my 10,000. I have a 25,000. And I still got a little bit of fixing to do, but as you can see some lines in there, but then you can see some really decent detail. Of course, you can get that kind of detail with a material. Of course. I was a material expert. But, for instance, game path. This is the one I ported over. Open. New inherited. And the DAE files actually port really well. They port with the material. So, that's really good. Unreal, you would do an FBX and then you would connect the texture to the basic color. So, to me, and I know that you can use a landscape maker or whatnot, but I'll tell you why I think this is a good thing to learn in Blender, other than using landscape tools and materials. So for now, I'm going to save this because I haven't. New. Yeah, file, new. General. For me, there is 72 bitmap limit in PlayStation. There is a 128, and for some computers, maybe even 256 bitmap limit in computers. And then there are 32 bitmap limits for mobile games and the Nintendo Switch. So it's important to cut down on textures, and that's what texture paint is good for. The bitmap limit doesn't care about the size of the texture, more so the amount of textures on one object. And so when you do it in a landscape material, you have like 17 textures plus the noise texture, and then if you're using normals, then plus those. And this, what I do is I use combine. Combine doesn't really work in other ways. So texture paint is very useful, but there's a way of doing it that I have grown to like a lot. And when you first start doing it, it's really annoying. But when you you're not first starting to do it, it's okay. So I haven't built yet a 75K texture, 7500 texture. Yeah, I haven't built a 7500. So that would be a 150 on the scale. I got a 20,000 and a 36,000. Not a little too big. And there are ways to shrink those and keep the detail. So the reason why you need a big texture is because of the pixels. You need the pixels to paint over the pixels. That sounds like it's common sense, but it's not so common. And also, there's a lot of things that would lead you in another place, like vertex painting. I've done vertex painting before, but vertex painting, well, Well, it requires vertices. And that means that you are in a bind with polys. And you can be in a bind with textures. You can kind of be in a bind with polys, but you genuinely don't want too many polys. So I'm doing a 7500. Oh, oops. By 7500. And then I'm going to call this, this is the third one I'm doing. Tutorial, I guess. And you also want to make it a UV grid. You don't have to make a UV grid, but I'm going to stop using that word now. I do. So, shader, editor, new shader. You don't have to do this. I do this because then it gives me a material. And then also, you do Shift A search for image, or you can go to texture and find image texture. Either way that works. And then you would click the last thing you made, and you would want to save that last thing you made. So you actually don't have to bake to do something really cool. But go back to texture editor. So image. I still want to save this, so I have to, I would use a folder, but there you go. And then the last thing you want to do is you want to have something for character size, but I'm not going to this time. If you want to have something for character size is usually your cube times 1.5 times z2. That would be a good, decent character size to start with. Subdivide 4 or 5 times. Sculpt mode. Get rid of symmetry. To get rid of symmetry, go to this tool button, active tool, and find symmetry, and take X. If you couldn't follow that for some reason, go to the sculpting tab, and you'll find symmetry again there, and you can take X away. So, I'm going to start sculpting now. Just kind of going to have some lines here or there. I'm not going to go too complex with it. This is 7500 by 7500. If you think it has anything to do with like computer performance for some reason, you think that you need a whole lot of computer performance, I'm only using a 960 i7. i7 is great, but the 960 is not too great. So you can do this in lower performing computers. Not sucky computers, but not like really great computers, if you know what I mean. So after you get some of your sculpting done, usually what I do is I do a smooth or a flatten, and I'm gonna have to have a little bit more strength. So smooth, flatten. What I also could do with the sculpting is I can add a it's fun to do it, but I'm not going to do it right now. But what I can do is I can add like a noise texture to it, and then that's like an alpha texture, alpha blend. And you could create your own noise texture and like a sketch thing in it, and it's really good for making like mounds and stuff. So, and then after that, and this is the only place this will be useful, but like making a road, for instance, this would be useful in, and like some buildings, you certainly want to try and use like materials for buildings, but there's other ways. There's other ways, and I like the idea of those other ways because then you can just start painting on, get your hands dirty, basically. So I'm going to go back to layout. This is what we got. We're going to start adding our textures now. I'm going to grab... okay, I have to actually show this. Go to ninjatexture.com. That's where you can get textures. Ninjatexture.com. If you don't know where to get textures, there's 4,000 free textures over there. You can be a Patreon or donate over to that guy. That guy, he sold a whole bunch of textures, and he didn't retire, but he decided to go open source with it. And it's really useful. It's very useful, and he's giving away like 4,000 free textures that are all open source and all free for commercial use. So, especially if you're me who's switching engines and you're invested with materials, that is a really good thing. Also, I kind of want to do a little smoothing, so I will smooth it out a little bit. Let's say by like 4, and let's do a 0.154 times as the 0.75. It's going to lower it a little bit, smooth it out a little bit. And that's good for me. Good enough for me. Good enough for a tutorial. So, this is not hard, but it is hard if you don't know much about the texture, the way the textures and stuff work, or if you're into the new stuff and you started in the new stuff but you don't know much about the old stuff. Or you're used to making landscape materials like I was, or you're used to making materials in Epic, but you can't figure out a way to layer materials in Blender. This is, you can do it in Blender, but this is a useful tool. Grass. Where did I last? Dead leaves? I did dead leaves. So I'm going to get dead leaves. I'm going to get one version of grass. Close it. Or copy it. And I'm going to get a second version of grass. Second version of grass. It's going to be 9070. I'm also going to add dirt this time instead of sand. Normally I was going for the island look, but this time I'm going to do dirt. So close that. Dirt. And rocks. And I have my caps lock on. See, it was in the ground. I don't know, I forgot which one it is. So I'd go to Documents, go dot game textures I can use, landscape, sand, and I would find the one that looks like dirt. That looks like asphalt, actually. That's rocks. 6388. 6388 and 0260 are the ones that I'm going to use for dirt. So basically it's going to be two of them. So it's going to be 6388 and 5772. Really. And that should do it for the textures that I need to make this scene. So it is 7,500, which gives me a little bit of room to work with. So what you're going to want to do is go to Texture Paint. And there's two ways to do this. I'm going to do it in shaders since it's going to emulate anyways. I could find my textures and do it with tiled. Tiled's weird because if I change radius or this scrolling stuff, it paints on based on how far I'm scaled in and scaled out. So it actually changes with respect to how far zoomed in I am and how far zoomed out I am. Or I could, and that's useful for a couple of things. That's good for cleaning stuff up. Or I can just go to 3D. Clicking on 3D, I can scale them, let's say 25 by 25. And that's going to be about the dirt texture for the size of this landscape. 25 by 25, or I could do 30. Something like that. You're going to get a lot of lines, but you're supposed to clean those up. This is going to take me a minute, so I'm actually going to pause and finish painting the sand. And then I'm going to paint the other textures, and I'm going to show you basically how to do the rest.
Well, I reloaded. Basically, I had to do some stuff. But anyways, fucking open recent. Last one I was doing. This one. Texture paint. And my sand texture is almost done. When I reload, what's going to happen, and it's something that I wanted to let others know. Uh-oh. Shit. Something happened. That was an accident. White is normal. But when I reload, basically what happened is all the textures went missing. Sorry for the different mic. I usually do an audio, and then I patch them together, but I didn't have enough time to do that. So, not all the time, but most of the time, if I click on here, I can see I have dirt, but that's all I have. So I have to go back and add those other textures, which is not going to be too bad. And as a matter of fact, oh, that's how you can do it. Right click to change color, and then there is a why? What the hell is that? Why would you? Oh, to change to RGB. I don't know. But then that does start to look actually like asphalt. That color's good. The ability to change colors it helps a lot. I don't want to make this a long video, but I don't have a whole lot of time to edit, so this is mainly for people who have patience, I guess. I can, however, pause and add those textures in. If you don't want to go from layout, of course, you can add them here, basically. So I would close that, new brush, open, find grass, add my grass. This grass tile's pretty bad. to say the least. But it is decent. It might look a little pixeled. Um, in which case, it this is why you would want to work with a better or a how do I put this? This is the reason why you'd want to have a bigger texture to work on, because you can only shrink your other textures so much until they start to lose their quality. But it's good enough for these purposes. But I should be okay at 20. I took a fifth out of it. And that is also the way that you take out the lines. Yeah, so it does. The quality's starting to come back. But because I want the texture to be small, I'm going to do 25. I'm going to lose detail, but I'm going to show you again how to remove those lines. Just double checking my stuff. 25. 25. What's going on? Are you serious? Okay. Whatever. I'm going to pause this, do the resting grass, and add the leaves and stuff. Another technique is you can zoom in kind of close, and that actually paints it on faster than zooming out. I don't know why that is, because I'm painting just as much in that time span it would take to load all that stuff up. I think it has to do with distance, and it's still trying to calculate scale. But this is really fast, and if I wanted to be a little more quicker, I know that my leaves are going to be here in the center, so I can just go ahead and paint it all on over here. Which, I mean, I can just look at this while I paint. Yeah. You can't look at angles doing this, but this is actually really fast too. I like to paint on the mesh, but you just got to do what you got to do. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering why it's a different color, it's because the specular was on. If you're wondering why I use the UV grid, you don't really need it, but it's good for sizing things up and keeping all your textures about the same size. The leaves don't actually tile that bad at all, really. And instead of going back between layout and texture paint to save, I could just save here, which is not bad. I just keep thinking about open up UV editor. I forget that this is like a UV editor, so that works. Now, and also you got to understand that I've still added color and tint to it, so it still looks pretty good with the color and tint added. Now, if you're wondering, how do I get rid of all these lines? Because the lines make it look like undignified, I guess. But I already covered the detail side of this. The tinier you go, the less detail you have. We still have some detail in there. Looking at the leaves is the same size texture. You can see that the leaves actually does hold up to detail. So it's not that it doesn't have detail. It's just so small that you can't see it. So there's no reason I shouldn't be able to pull up grass. Now, there's two ways I can do this. I can get a different grass texture, which I'm gonna do, but I can also get the grass texture I have, and I can find a variable number. Oh, that's 180. I can find a number that will cover the lines without creating more lines. It's going to create lines if you keep it up. And you generally want to use a different strength. So in case it does create lines, you can get rid of it fairly easily. Also, the good thing about doing stuff like this is where you can start tinting it out. So let me add a little bit of green. That might be too green. The wider you go, the closer to the original color. But you can get some really nice tints in these textures. And the size of 18 compared to 25 isn't so big that it inflates the texture too much. And this is also like a way of creating noise using texturing. So I'm going to actually come back in a minute to discuss the other ways of making this look a little cooler and other techniques. So once you've covered almost all the lines with your grass, which you can see, I've just been burying this, and a shortcut is you can slide this left and right if you drag it down. So it's useful, but you still have that variant that you want, also different texture grass. So the second technique, and people will probably already guess this, but some people don't, is you can take a different texture that looks similar, maybe not that similar, but it's of the same kind, and I'm going to make this a little wider than normal because it's a decent grass. And then this is good enough if I bring the strength down a little bit because this is a strong texture. This is good enough to wipe away the rest of the lines, uh, given that I'm in the right parameters. And I can also use it where I have white if I don't want dead grass, for instance. And you might be noticing that some of this stuff looks like it's poking out is because I built it that way with this technique. I built it that way. It looks nicer that way. A lot of fun things you can do with textures. Oh, there's my line. Oh, and this is a smaller texture, a larger texture, so I actually can go lower in size and not get too many lines. This is a little greener than I'd like. Oh, super green. Maybe I go dark. Yeah, that might actually be what we need. Something a little darker. There we go. There's a line. The lines kind of do stay a little bit. It's hard to get rid of lines. If you have a keen eye, you won't, like, you'll see the lines, but most of the time, most people don't notice them until they played the game for a long, long time because they don't have a eye for art and they want to really just get through the level. But it is like it's going to bug you as an artist, but it's just something that it just takes time to get the lines out. This is also a good way to show variation in your models. Help a lot. And a lot of people go straight to vertex paint without thinking about using texture paint because it is one texture, not multiple. Doing this to see my lines. And I can actually take this up to make it a little smaller to get rid of the line. Oh, yeah, the smaller you make it, the closer that line's going to be. When that happens, you can also just offset it a little bit, and that helps. You can offset it. That's the other method. Offsetting the line helps a lot, and it is better for those of you who are worried about scaling. Some of this stuff sounds simple, trust me, I know. But some people, including myself, don't catch on to the tools that you have and just keep using the same tools over and over. And that can do the job, but knowing a different amount of tools actually helps a whole lot. And we almost got rid of almost all the lines. I think well, there's some lines right there, but I'm gonna do something different with that actually. So some of these are meant to be here. So I just do a little bit of variation around them because I want to keep those there, even if it doesn't look the best. Hold on a sec. Like these pieces of grass sticking up, and it looks like, oh, that's a line. That's okay because that's a natural looking line, not like a texture line like this little line right here. And there is actually creases, and people say there's no squares in nature. Yeah, it frustrates me. There is creases and stuff like that in nature. It doesn't look like a perfect square, but there are lines in nature. And that's going to take you a little bit, but after you get something that you kind of like, I mean, it doesn't look that great from far away, but it's going to be covered in vegetation. Up close, though, it does look really nice, and that's the reason why I do it, is for up close. I can start adding something like dirt. That's grass. Start adding dirt, a different dirt texture. I'm not trying to make this a long video, but I can go to grass. No, it's not in grass, it's definitely in sand. I forget which one. 668 is the standard dirt. 6388, is that the other dirt? I don't know. Let me brighten it up. It looks like the same dirt. It is the same dirt. 63, 66. I'll have to go look in my files, which is alright. And 6388 is the one I'm using. 0260. That doesn't look like dirt. But I saw one that I did like. that 95 to 63. Let's look at 95, 63 because that does look cool. Yeah, that could be some kind of dirt. Clay, maybe. Yeah, that could be a thing. Totally be a thing. Also, it helps with the terrain. And there's a piece that I wanted to be this clay, and it's going to be this over here. Notice how I'm keeping that grass texture? It's because I'm about to use it to cover this stuff. I'm also going to have to add different colors, but strength. Probably going to change the color a little bit because that is really red. Yeah, that looks a little better. Okay, so we have pieces of grass sticking out, which is fine. It's exactly what we need. Okay, now I can take the grass texture, find it. I also know about opacity, which is really nice. Uh-oh, what the hell's going on? Why? Yes. Maybe that's not as big as I want it to be. Still not as big as I want it to be. Maybe it's a little greener. Mm. Yeah, it's big enough. You don't want it to be too big because it's going to look really weird if it's really big. It's like, whoa, that is above average normal, like above, way above regular grass. You know, you just spend your time on it. Gonna do some offsets, which help a lot. Also gives you different colors, a little bit, depending on what texture you're using. Where you're not seeing those colors, it'll give you some colors that you might really like. Bigger offsets. Huh. I actually had a dream about doing this tutorial, believe it or not. Maybe it's because I've done it so much, I don't know. That's a little too, that's green. That's cool. That's a good color. Let's see what the grass was for now. It has a grass on the corner. That's why it's like that. Super easy to get rid of lines if you're skilled enough. Super easy. Going back to a different grass, maybe. Just trying stuff out at this point. I forget about how bright this grass is. Sometimes dark is better. If the grass looks out of place, just make a thing around it. Take the strength down, and you can kind of blend it over. Pun not intended, but you know it's there. Then we can work on texture masks, which are helpful. But to be fair, I'm not really using it for a game. And I think I've taught you at this point how far you can take textures. I mean, yeah, this needs a little bit of time to it, maybe another 30 minutes or so, but I'm not going to be using it. So what I'm going to do is close it, put it in a DE file and an FBX file. It doesn't matter. If you have an FBX file, all you do is port it to Unreal and attach the texture to it. If you have a DAE file, it should be automatic for Godot, which is great. It's not responding. I don't know why. Maybe because of size. But yeah, this is what you do. If you were going to go and paint a landscape in Unreal, even if you were going to do noise and stuff, you're still going to have to some degree, adjust for lines and stuff. That is what you do with landscapes. Now, to be honest, I've played with landscapes and I've seen some cool stuff with landscapes, but when I get really down and dirty, when I get really close to it, I still notice some of these things that bother me. And this is me getting around that. Also, I like Godot. I've learned to love Godot, actually. So I'm actually going to end the video here. I've done 7,000, 5,000, 20,000, and 36,000 texture size maps. The benefits to using bigger textures rather than using multiple textures, I'll tell you them right now. You have a texture bitmap limitation. That's with all devices. Computers have a texture bitmap limitation, 128. I don't care how badass you think your computer is, or 256. This means that no matter how badass your computer is, no matter how awesome it is, no matter how good your graphics card is, once you go over that limit, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have, there's a period, bottlenecks. So once you go over that limit, it's done. You done ruined it. You have to go back and create multi-tier textures. Textures that have multiple textures in them to stretch it out. Or you have to create materials. Materials that look like textures. Or you can do this and have all kinds of textures on one texture, and you can spread that texture around a whole bunch of mesh. You can do it this way, and this is, in my opinion, this is the best way. This is because I can edit on a 3D map. That means that no matter how many meshes there are, I can paint on that 3D map if they're all sharing that same texture. And then I can bring, because it's DAE files, I can export into Godot. I can continuously update the landscape that way, and I can add stuff. I can add clips and all that other stuff from Blender and mesh that texture with it. I'm not technically, I'm not technically supposed to be the artist. I'm supposed to be the dev, the level dev, but this is something that I would love doing as an artist. If I was doing art, it is going to be vegetation. It's going to be level dev stuff. This is relatable. This is going to be relatable to vegetation. This is going to be relatable to cliffs. This is going to be relatable to water. And when it comes down to it, having this tool is going to help me with concrete. Having this tool is going to help me with roads. Having this tool is going to help me with if I even have to build some props and buildings. Having this tool will help me do that. It's a great tool. It's better than Vertex Paint by far, in my opinion. And then taking somebody else's stuff, knowing the limitations of a game is important. You can't be a game dev if you don't know the limitations of your targeted systems. So being able to take all those textures, put them all into one, and make them all one texture is going to help you with your texture bitmap limitations. And doing this, like for instance, if I have a sky sphere, which it should be based on how the clouds move, I can create clouds with cloud textures and variations. I can do that way, or I can open up another thing where I would the way I would open. I have this app, Sketch app, but I don't want to drag this on too long. But I have the Sketch app, and that's where I can like create clouds and stuff. That's where I can create tree bark or whatever. So I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it. I'm just saying that the reason why you would do it this way is because you're working in a different engine. You don't want to use a landscape tool because of the texture limitations, or you want to use something other than computational noise to deal with your problems. You want to do it in an artistic way. And then doing it in an artistic way, to me, is more admirable because it takes longer and it looks nicer. Eventually, it looks nicer.